I still remember the sound the rain made that night, thin, metallic, like someone was dragging nails across the roof. It was the kind of rain that keeps you awake, that makes you feel watched. And maybe that's why I saw her. Through the half-drawn curtain, my sister, Lena, stood under the porch light. Her face glowed in that ghostly yellow, soaked to the bone, eyes too calm for someone who'd just driven through a storm. She wasn't shivering. She wasn't even blinking. Just standing there, like she was waiting for me to open the door and let her in. I remember thinking, something's happened. Not someone's here, not my sister's visiting, but something has gone wrong. When I opened the door, the smell of rain and cold hit me first. Then her perfume, still the same, that honeyed lilac she'd worn since high school. It mixed strangely with the dampness, like sweetness rotting on the stem. She said only 3 words. "He doesn't deserve you." I didn't know who he was, not yet. Not the way she meant it. Earlier that day, everything had been ordinary. I'd made tea while my husband, Daniel, read the news on his phone, scrolling with that distracted half-frown he always wore in the mornings. Our daughter, Maya, was late for school again. She never could find her shoes. It was the quiet kind of happiness. The kind you don't notice until it's gone. I used to joke that my life was beige, warm, unremarkable, steady. I liked it that way. But Lena, she was color, always had been. When we were little, she was the one who jumped from the high dive first, who cut her own hair at 13 just to see what would happen. I was the one holding the towel, worrying. We grew up close, though, almost like twins, even if she was 2 years older. When our mother died, it was Lena who kept me breathing. She'd say, "You don't have to be strong, Jules. I'll be strong for both of us." And for a long time, I believed her. So when she showed up on my porch that night, rain-soaked and whispering about protection, I didn't question her. I didn't see the knife behind the kindness. She stayed that night. I made up the guest room, gave her dry clothes, poured us both tea. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around her mug, staring at me in that way she does, like she's memorizing my face. "You look tired," she said softly. "Just the weather," I smiled. "No, it's more than that." Her tone had changed, not sisterly, but assessing, like a doctor before bad news. "You don't have to pretend with me, Jules," she went on. "I know what he's been doing." I frowned. "Who?" "Daniel." Her voice was flat, not angry, not sympathetic, just certain. The clock on the wall ticked so loud it almost hurt. "I've seen the messages," she continued. "He's cheating on you." The words didn't land right. They floated in the air, meaningless, until she added, "With someone you know." That's when the room tilted. My first instinct wasn't disbelief. It was defense. I wanted to protect her from being wrong, to say, "No, you misunderstood." Because Daniel wasn't that man. And Lena wouldn't lie. Except, one of them had to be. I remember the hum of the refrigerator, the scent of chamomile cooling between us. I remember saying, "That's impossible," and hearing how small my voice sounded. Lena didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, Jules. I didn't want to tell you like this, but I can't watch him keep doing this to you." Her eyes shimmered, just enough to seem kind. She reached for my hand, squeezed it like a promise. "You've always protected everyone else," she said. "Let me protect you for once." And I, fool that I was, believed her. I let her stay. I let her hold me when I cried that night, her hand stroking my hair the way our mother used to. She whispered, "It's going to be okay." And I thought maybe it would be. But if I'd known what she really meant by protect, I would have locked the door instead. By morning, the rain had stopped, but something in the air had shifted, a stillness, heavy and expectant. Daniel kissed my cheek before leaving for work, his usual perfunctory brush of lips. When he saw Lena at the table, he froze for just a second too long, just long enough for something inside me to notice. She smiled at him, that easy, honey-smooth smile that could mean anything. He smiled back, but it didn't reach his eyes. And I thought, maybe she's right. I didn't know that was the moment it began, the unraveling. That evening, after Daniel left for a meeting and Maya went to bed, I found Lena sitting on the back porch again, smoking one of Daniel's cigarettes. The air smelled of wet leaves and tobacco. "You used to hate those," I said. "I still do," she smiled. Some habits are just contagious. There was something in her tone I couldn't name. Something too casual for a warning, too sharp for affection. She turned to me. "You deserve better, Jules. You always have." And I believed her. I always believed her. Until I realized she wasn't talking about Daniel's betrayal at all. She was talking about her own. Before everything cracked open, my life was small, in the kind of way that made me feel safe. Every morning began the same. The smell of coffee drifting through the kitchen before sunrise. The muffled sound of Maya's cartoons in the living room. Daniel's tie hanging half knotted around his neck while he checked emails on his phone. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't dramatic. It was ours. We'd bought our house 7 years ago. A 2-story colonial with peeling white shutters and a yard too big for us to manage. Daniel had promised to paint the shutters that summer. He never did, but I loved them anyway, those faded edges. They reminded me that real things, living things, always showed wear. On Sundays, I'd bake banana bread. Maya would lick the bowl, Daniel would read the paper at the kitchen table, and I'd watch them, thinking, this is it. Not the wild kind of happiness, not the cinematic one. Just enough. I had my routines, my rituals. The pink mug for mornings. The gray sweater I always wore when I cleaned. The candle that smelled like cedar and vanilla, always burning by evening. When you've lost a mother young, you learn to worship small certainties. Lena never understood that. She used to tease me. You're living like you're in a Hallmark movie. She'd laugh, and I'd smile and tell her, that's the point. Because I'd had enough chaos in my life. I'd spent my 20s chasing stability, the steady job at the local library, the house, the husband who made promises in quiet tones. Lena, though. She was always the wildfire. By the time she came back into my life that night in the rain, she'd already been through 3 cities, 2 engagements, and 1 nervous breakdown I didn't learn about until much later. Still, she was my sister, and that meant something. When she called 6 months earlier saying she'd lost her apartment in the city, I'd offered to help. I told her she could stay with us for a few weeks while she figured things out. She'd refused then, saying she didn't want to be a burden. So when she appeared at my door months later, unannounced and dripping from the storm, I didn't think twice. That's the thing about family. You don't need to understand them to open the door. Daniel and Lena had always had a polite relationship, cordial, friendly. He found her dramatic, and she found him boring. At least, that's what I used to believe. But after that night, something shifted. The first few mornings after she moved in, I'd find them in the kitchen before I came down, her laughing softly at something on his phone, him pouring her coffee before his own. It didn't seem strange at first. She'd always been charming. He'd always been kind. But kindness has edges. Once, I overheard her say, "You really should smile more, Daniel. You have a good smile." And the way she said it, light, playful, it was nothing, except that it wasn't. He smiled back, the kind of smile men give when they think no one's watching. Lena settled into our home easily. Too easily. She'd hum while she cooked, leave her books on the couch, light candles I didn't remember buying. She helped Maya with her school projects, brought home flowers for the table, folded laundry that wasn't hers. It should have been comforting, having her there, another pair of hands, another heart in the house. Instead, it felt like she was rewriting the rhythm of our lives, note by note. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe this was what it looked like when someone truly tried to help. But sometimes, at night, I'd wake up and hear faint laughter from downstairs, her voice, and Daniel's. Low, intimate. Once, I went down to get water and found them sitting close on the couch. The TV still on but muted. She was holding a blanket around her shoulders, and he was leaning forward, saying something I couldn't hear. When they noticed me, they pulled apart too quickly. "We couldn't sleep," she said, smiling. "Just talking," Daniel added, and I, desperate to keep the peace, nodded, pretending not to notice the electricity between them, the way the air thickened around their silence. Still, I tried to believe the best. That's the curse of gentle women. We confuse denial for forgiveness. I kept cooking, cleaning, keeping our home together like nothing was wrong. I made space for her. I wanted to believe she was right, that she'd come back to protect me, to help me see something I couldn't. She'd sit at the kitchen table, telling me she worried about me, that I'd lost my spark. "You used to paint, remember?" she'd say. "You used to wear red lipstick. When's the last time you did something just for you?" She wasn't cruel when she said it. That was the problem. It all sounded like love. And I, hungry for connection, let her words seep in. Maybe Daniel was distant. Maybe I had become dull. Lena had a way of turning concern into a mirror. And somehow, I was always the reflection that looked tired, small, and needing rescue. There was one evening, about 3 weeks after she moved in, when the 3 of us sat down for dinner, roasted chicken, potatoes, salad. Lena poured the wine, laughing about some story from our childhood, how she convinced me to sneak into the lake one summer night, and we both got caught by Dad. Daniel laughed too, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in months. And I remember feeling this ache deep in my chest, because it was like watching two parts of my life connect in a way that didn't need me. After dinner, when I started clearing the table, Lena stopped me. "Sit, Jules. Let us do it." Us. That word again. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, listening to their laughter from the kitchen. The sound of running water, clinking dishes, the rhythm of voices that belong together too easily. And that's when the first thread of fear wound tight inside me. Not panic, not rage. Just a quiet knowing. The kind that doesn't scream, but hums. Something was wrong, but I couldn't tell if it was with them or with me. It started with a scent. Not perfume, not hers, not mine, but that faint trace of cologne that used to belong to Daniel alone. I smelled it one afternoon when I walked into the guest room after Lena had gone out for groceries. It was his brand, musky, cedar, a little too sharp for my taste. I'd stopped noticing it on him years ago, but in that room, it felt invasive, like a stranger had been there. The sheets were perfectly smooth, the kind of smooth that's deliberate. And on the nightstand, a single coffee mug, Daniel's, the chipped navy one he always used at work. I stared at it, heart hammering, until I convinced myself there had to be a reason. He'd probably gone in to fix the leaky window latch, or she'd borrowed the mug and forgotten to return it. That was how I survived those first few weeks, rewriting reality until it made sense again. But truth has a way of leaking through even the tightest seams. Lena began working from home soon after. Some remote project, she said, for an old client. Daniel's schedule shifted, too. He started coming home for lunch, saying he needed a break from the office. I wanted to see the goodness in it, that he was making an effort, that maybe Lena's presence had reminded him what home could feel like. But sometimes, I'd come home early from errands and find the air heavy with laughter, the kind that stops the moment you open the door. Once, I caught a glimpse through the back window, her leaning close, whispering something that made him grin like a boy. When they saw me, she called out, "We were just talking about you." I smiled back, pretending not to notice how quickly Daniel's hand dropped from the counter, how her cheeks flushed a little too pink. The next clue came in whispers. One night, I heard Ma ask from her room, "Mommy, why does Aunt Lena hug Daddy so long?" I froze in the hallway, my fingers still on the light switch. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I dunno," she shrugged, fiddling with her blanket. "It's just long, like when I'm sad and you hug me that way." I told her adults just have different ways of saying hello, but my throat burned as I said it, because a child's eyes don't lie. By then, Lena had woven herself into every part of our lives. She helped Daniel with his paperwork, saying she had more business sense. She took Maya shopping for clothes, told me I needed a break. She even started cooking his favorite meals, the ones I used to make when we first married. When I mentioned it, she'd smile and say, "You taught me everything, Jules. I'm just trying to lighten your load." And it was that, trying to protect me again. That same script she'd always used when she wanted control. But something about the way she said it now made my stomach twist. One evening, I came home to find them on the floor with a bottle of wine between them. The lights were low, music soft. Lena was barefoot, her feet tucked under her, Daniel's tie loosened around his neck. They both looked up at me, startled but smiling. "You're home early," Daniel said, too quickly. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice even. Book club ended sooner than I thought. He nodded, reaching for his glass. "We were just talking." Lena's eyes lingered on me a little too long, searching, testing. "We were reminiscing," she added. "You remember that summer at the lake, Jules? The one where Daniel came to visit us before you two were dating?" I nodded slowly. "I remember. You were so shy then," she said with a laugh. "I had to convince you to even talk to him." Her tone was light, but there was something behind it, a glimmer of ownership. Like she was reminding both of us of the beginning, of who'd introduced who. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her hand resting too close to his, her laughter spilling into the quiet like a warning bell. I started noticing other things. Small, forgettable things that built into something unignorable. A text on Daniel's phone from L. "Don't forget tomorrow. Can't wait." He said it was about the plumbing repair she'd scheduled for us. A strand of blonde hair, hers, on his jacket. The way she'd linger near him when she poured wine, her hand brushing his shoulder, casual but intimate. Once, I walked in as she straightened his collar. They both froze. "There," she said, smiling too brightly. "You can't let him go to work looking sloppy." I wanted to scream. But instead, I laughed, brittle force, because anger would make it real. And I wasn't ready for real. Then came the day she called me at work. "Jules, I think you should come home." Her voice trembling just enough. "What's wrong?" "It's Daniel. He's not himself lately. I don't want to scare you, but I think he's hiding something." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "Just come home, please." When I got there, everything looked normal. Too normal. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, calm, sipping coffee. "What's going on?" I asked. "Apparently, I'm not myself," he said dryly. "Your sister seems to think I'm keeping secrets." Lena stood by the counter, eyes wide, wounded. "I was just worried," she murmured. I didn't mean to start anything. They looked at me then, both of them, waiting for me to pick a side. And that was when I realized what she was doing. She wasn't just taking my husband. She was rewriting the story, making herself the savior, the protector, the one who saw what I couldn't. By turning us against each other, she could walk right into the space she created, the space where I once belonged. That night, when Daniel went to bed, Lena came into my room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her face soft, careful. "You know I love you, right?" she whispered. I nodded, though my chest ached. "I just want to protect you from getting hurt." And then, softly, almost too soft to hear, she added, "Sometimes people do terrible things when they're unhappy." The implication hung between us. Poisonous. "What are you saying?" I asked. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "I'm saying I'll always take care of you, no matter what happens." And then she kissed my forehead like a mother, stood, and left the room. The door closed quietly behind her, but it sounded like a lock turning. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of day that feels too ordinary to carry the weight of a life collapsing. The morning light was soft and gray, the smell of rain still clinging to the windows. Daniel left early for work. Or at least, that's what I thought. I was in the laundry room, sorting clothes, when I realized his jacket wasn't in the hamper. The one he'd worn the night before. The same one with the faint trace of her perfume on it. At first, it was just irritation. That quiet flicker of annoyance that your partner can't even leave his clothes where they belong. But then something tugged inside me, that small, animal sense of wrongness that I'd been ignoring for weeks. And without knowing why, I checked the pocket of his jeans. There, folded in half, was a receipt. A single line at the top read, "Lakeside Inn, room 204, yesterday's date." 2 glasses of wine. Time froze around that piece of paper. The hum of the dryer. The drip of the faucet. The slow unraveling sound inside my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just stood there, holding the evidence of a world I no longer lived in. I could have confronted him then. I could have thrown the receipt at him and demanded the truth. But something colder, quieter took over. The kind of calm you only feel when your heart has finally stopped begging. I waited until evening. Until he said he had a late meeting. Then I followed him. The Lakeside Inn sat just off the highway, a tired, 2-story place with faded blue curtains and a neon vacancy sign that buzzed even in daylight. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, but I kept driving, inch by inch, until I saw his car parked near the back. I remember the smell of damp asphalt, the hum of distant traffic, how still everything felt, as if the world was holding its breath with me. I walked up the stairs to room 204. My pulse was so loud it drowned out every sound but one: laughter. Her laughter. Lena's. It was unmistakable, light, careless, familiar. The same sound that used to echo through our childhood bedroom when we'd share secrets under the covers. And then his voice. Low, intimate. A softness I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. Something inside me cracked open. I pressed my hand against the door, and for a second, I thought about knocking. I imagined her face when she saw me. His, but I didn't. Instead, I turned the handle slowly, quietly. It wasn't locked. The room was dim, the only light coming from a lamp on the nightstand. Clothes lay scattered on the chair. His jacket. Her red scarf. They didn't see me at first. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing his shirt. He stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder like it belonged there. When he looked up and saw me, his mouth opened, but no sound came. Lena turned, and for a moment, there was no guilt in her eyes, just shock. And then something else. Relief. "Jules," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Her words sliced through me. Not "I'm sorry." Not "it's not what it looks like." But I didn't want you to find out. As if the betrayal itself wasn't the sin, only the exposure. Daniel stepped forward, reaching for me. "Jules, wait. Don't," I said. My voice sounded strange, almost calm. "How long?" He swallowed. "A few months." "Months?" The word echoed. It didn't even sound like mine anymore. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, voice breaking. "You were so distant, and she what?" I turned to Lena. She was crying now, quiet tears that looked rehearsed. "I was trying to protect you," she said. "He was unhappy, Jules. I didn't want you to get hurt." I laughed, actually laughed, this hollow, broken sound that scared even me. "Protect me?" I whispered. "By sleeping with my husband?" She stood, clutching the shirt around her. "You don't understand. You've been so numb for years. He needed someone to talk to." I tried to help. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You didn't mean for it to go this far," I repeated, the words tasting like acid. "You always needed saving," she whispered. "I've been doing it my whole life." And that was it. The truth behind her softness. The power she'd always taken from my weakness. I stared at her, this woman who shared my blood, my memories, my mother's eyes, and realized she'd never been trying to protect me. She'd been trying to replace me. I left without another word, walked out into the cool night air, my legs shaking, heart numb. Behind me, I heard Daniel call my name once. Just once. But I didn't look back. The sky was low and heavy, full of unfallen rain. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. This woman with mascara smudged under her eyes, hair damp from tears. I didn't recognize her. She looked like someone who had loved too much and listened too little. When I finally started the engine, I wasn't sure where I was going. Home didn't feel like home anymore. That night, I packed a small bag, clothes, toothbrush, Maya's favorite stuffed bear. I didn't wake her. I couldn't. I just stood in her doorway, watching her sleep, her little chest rising and falling in the half-light. Lena's perfume still lingered in the hallway. I opened the window, let the air wash through. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Just one sentence. "You both deserve each other." Then I drove to my sister's opposite, our cousin's house 2 towns over, and stayed there for the night. The next morning, Daniel showed up at the door. He looked wrecked, eyes bloodshot, hair uncombed. "Please, Jules, let me explain." "You already did," I said quietly. "It was a mistake." "No," I whispered. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a choice." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "You think she cares about you?" I asked. "She doesn't love anyone she can't control." His eyes flickered, the first flash of doubt, but it was too late. I closed the door between us, and for the first time in years, silence felt like safety. But silence has a way of growing teeth. And in the days that followed, I would learn that my sister hadn't just taken my husband. She was about to take everything else I loved. The first morning after I left, I woke to the sound of birds. Real birds, not the soft hum of the refrigerator, not the faint rhythm of Maya's cartoons, just the clean, unfiltered sound of the world continuing without me. For a long time, I stayed in that half-dream state, my body heavy, my mind refusing to catch up. Then the memory came, Lena, Daniel, the hotel room, and it was like my lungs forgot how to fill. I'd always thought betrayal would feel like fire, wild, hot, destructive, but it wasn't. It was cold. It was the kind of cold that seeps into your bones quietly, until you realize it's already too late to get warm again. I spent the next few days at my cousin Nora's house. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me coffee in the mornings and wine at night. Sometimes she'd sit beside me, silent. Sometimes she'd put her hand over mine and whisper, "Take your time." I didn't tell her the whole truth. Not yet, because saying it out loud felt like giving it oxygen, like letting it grow teeth. I checked my phone constantly, waiting for messages, apologies, something. Daniel texted every day at first. "Daniel, please talk to me. Daniel, I made a mistake. Daniel, she means nothing to me. Daniel, Maya keeps asking where you are." I didn't reply. I couldn't trust what his words meant anymore, or what I'd want them to mean. Then, one night, I got a different kind of message. From Lena. "Lena, I didn't plan it this way. Lena, you know I love you. Lena, I only wanted to protect you from the truth." That last one made me laugh out loud. A bitter, humorless sound. Protect me. Always that word. I blocked her number. It took me nearly a week to drive back home. I told myself I needed to get Maya's school things, to talk to her teacher, to sort practical matters. But really, I needed to see the wreckage for myself. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same, calm, unassuming, deceitfully whole. The shutters still peeling, the flower pots still lined on the porch. Only the silence felt different. Inside, everything was too clean. Her touch was everywhere, fresh flowers on the counter, the faint smell of her lilac perfume, new curtains I hadn't chosen. She'd made herself at home. In my home, Maya's backpack was hanging on the chair. I followed her laughter to the backyard. She was playing with Lena, splashing water at her from the garden hose. Daniel stood nearby, smiling. It was a picture of happiness, except it wasn't mine anymore. When Maya saw me, she squealed and ran over. "Mommy." I dropped to my knees and hugged her tight. Her hair smelled like strawberries and sun. Daniel stepped forward, cautious. "Jules, we didn't expect you today." "Clearly," I said. Lena was behind him, drying her hands on a towel. She looked almost shy, or maybe just satisfied. "You look tired," she said softly. "Don't," I warned. "Don't you dare speak to me like you care." Daniel glanced between us, his jaw tightening. "Can we not do this in front of Maya?" I turned to him. "You already did." That night, I stayed at the house, in the guest room, ironically. I told Daniel I wanted to talk about custody, about what came next. When he went to put Maya to bed, I walked through the house slowly, touching the walls, the furniture. Everything felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by what used to be mine. On the kitchen table sat a small pile of mail. Bills, flyers, and one envelope with my name on it, in Lena's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a note. "I'm sorry you found out like that. But one day, you'll understand. You and I are the same. We just want to be loved. Don't hate me, Jules." I did what you couldn't. My hands shook as I read it. She'd written it like a confession, but it read like a declaration. Like she truly believed she was the victim of her own betrayal. I tore the letter in half, then into quarters, then again until the pieces looked like ash. Later that night, when Daniel came downstairs, I told him quietly, "I want you to move out." He stared at me, unblinking. "You can't mean that. This is my home too." "No," I said. "It's the place where I built a life and you set it on fire. It's not your home anymore." He rubbed his face, pacing. "It was a mistake, Jules. I swear. I don't even know how it happened." One night, she came to me crying about you, saying you were unhappy, that she was worried. She said you were falling apart, that I didn't see it. "And that made you sleep with her?" He flinched. I thought she was trying to help. "She was," I said bitterly. "She just wasn't helping me." He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I ruined everything." "No," I whispered. "We did." I let her in. I thought love meant trust. I thought family meant safety. There was nothing left to say after that. Only silence, deep and final. The next morning, I told Maya that Daddy was going to stay somewhere else for a while. She cried, and I held her, whispering that we'd be okay. I didn't tell her that her aunt was the reason we weren't. Some truths are too heavy for small shoulders. Lena didn't come by that day. Or the next. But I knew she would. And when she did, I'd be ready. Not with rage, but with the kind of strength that comes from finally seeing the truth. Not through her eyes, but through my own. Because I finally understood what she meant that first night when she said she wanted to protect me. She didn't mean she wanted to keep me safe. She meant she wanted to keep me small, and I was done being small. News in small towns spreads like perfume. Sweet at first, then cloying, then impossible to wash off. It started with whispers at the grocery store. A woman from my church stopped me near the produce aisle, her smile too polite, her eyes too curious. "Jules, honey, how are you holding up?" That was the first sign. I hadn't told anyone, but someone had. By the time I reached the checkout line, 2 more women had offered me those same soft, pitying looks, the kind that come right before gossip ripens. When I got home, I didn't have to wonder long. My cousin Nora called. "She's telling people she was only trying to help you." "What?" "Lena. She's spinning it like she sacrificed herself for your marriage. That you were depressed, and she got too close to Daniel trying to pull him back to you." I almost laughed. The absurdity was breathtaking. "So now she's the martyr?" "Jules." Nora hesitated. "She's saying you pushed her away first." I sank into a chair, gripping the edge of the table until my fingers ached. Of course she was. That's what Lena did best. Twist compassion into a weapon. The following Sunday, I went to church for the first time in weeks. I needed something steady, something untouched by her hands. But even there, I could feel the eyes on me, the quiet rustle of whispers as I walked past. When the service ended, Pastor Helen approached, her smile measured. "Jules, I've been praying for you." "Thank you," I said softly. "Your sister came by last week. She's very concerned for you." I closed my eyes briefly, inhaling the scent of old wood and incense. "I'm sure she is. She said you're not well, that you've been struggling to cope." My breath caught. She was rewriting the narrative again, turning my pain into pathology. And because she cried when she lied, people believed her. I left before the choir began, my chest tight with something between fury and grief. Back home, I found Daniel sitting on the porch steps. He looked thinner, older. Guilt had a way of aging him fast. "They're talking," he said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. "I know. She's been telling everyone I seduced her, that she tried to stop it." "Of course she is," I said. "That's what she does. She breaks things and then pretends she's the one who's bleeding." He looked down, voice low. "I thought she cared about you. She cared about being the center of your attention," I said. "The rest was collateral." He nodded, his jaw trembling. "I deserve it, you know. The whispers, the shame." "Maybe," I said, "but I don't." And that was when I decided I wouldn't let her define the story. Not this time. That week, I called a lawyer. We began the divorce papers quietly, privately. No theatrics, no shouting, just clean signatures and truth. Daniel didn't fight it. He agreed to shared custody of Maya, to leave the house, to give me the space I needed. When Lena found out, she called me from a new number. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me wanted to hear her voice one last time. "You're really doing this?" she asked. "You mean freeing myself?" "Yes. You're being cruel, Jules. To Maya, to him, to yourself." "No," I said evenly. "I'm being honest for once." She laughed then, a low, brittle sound. "You always were dramatic." "No, Lena. You were." I just kept cleaning up the mess afterward. There was a pause. "You'll regret this," she said finally. "You'll end up alone. You always do." "Maybe," I said. "But at least this time, I'll be alone on my own terms." I hung up, and that was the last time I ever heard her voice. A week later, the truth began to seep through the cracks of her lies. Someone, I never found out who, leaked photos from the hotel. Screenshots of text receipts proof. It wasn't me. But I can't say I was sorry. The story flipped overnight. Suddenly, the pitying looks became ones of horror, of disbelief. People started to whisper her name with shame, not sympathy. She stopped coming to church, stopped showing up at the coffee shop, or the farmer's market. For the first time in her life, Lena wasn't the center of the story. She was the cautionary tale. Daniel faced his share of humiliation too. Colleagues found out. His boss gave him a temporary leave. Maya's teacher called me, concerned. Apparently another parent had mentioned something in passing. That was when it hit me how far the ripples reached, how a single betrayal could stain everything around it. But I kept my head high. I went to every school meeting, every grocery run, every walk through town, shoulders straight, voice calm. I refused to wear shame that wasn't mine. Because dignity, I realized, is its own kind of revenge. Months passed. Lena moved away. No one knew where. Daniel found a small apartment nearby for Maya's visits. And slowly, the noise quieted. But quiet doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the space where you start to rebuild. One afternoon, I found an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. Lena and me, age 12, sitting by the lake, laughing, our hair tangled in the wind. On the back, she'd written, "You'll always be my sister whether you want to or not." I stared at it for a long time. Then I tore it once down the middle, not out of hate, but closure. Because the thing about family is, sometimes the only way to survive them is to stop letting them define who you are. That night, as I tucked Maya into bed, she asked quietly, "Mommy, are you still mad at Aunt Lena?" I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I'm not mad anymore. Do you miss her?" I paused. The truth was complicated, too heavy for a child. So I said, "Sometimes. But missing someone doesn't mean you want them back." She nodded thoughtfully, then closed her eyes. And as I watched her drift to sleep, I felt something I hadn't in months: stillness. Not the brittle calm of denial, but the steady quiet of a woman who had finally survived the fire. The first thing I did after the dust settled was paint the kitchen. It sounds small, almost ridiculous, but it felt like reclaiming something. The pale yellow Lena had chosen was too bright, too cheerful, too unlike me. So I painted it a deep, quiet green, the color of moss after rain. Every stroke was a confession. Every inch I covered was a layer of her erased. By the time I was done, my arms ached, and there were specks of paint on my hair, my cheeks, my wrists. But for the first time in months, the space looked like mine. Healing didn't happen like I expected. There was no grand breakthrough, no cinematic moment of forgiveness. It came slowly, in fragments, in morning light across clean sheets, in the sound of Maya's laughter echoing through the halls, in the quiet satisfaction of a dinner made just for us two. Some days, I still woke with a pang, a memory brushing against me like cold wind. Other days, I felt nothing at all. Both, I learned, were progress. Grief isn't linear. It's circular. It revisits you when you least expect it. When a song comes on, or when a stranger wears her perfume, or when your daughter says something with her same tilt of tone. But each time it came, it stayed shorter, burned less. One afternoon, I sat with my therapist, Claire, a woman with silver hair and eyes that didn't flinch. She asked, "What do you miss most, him or her?" I thought for a long time before answering. "Neither," I said finally. "I miss the version of me who believed them." Claire nodded. "The trusting one?" "The naive one," I said. "The woman who thought love and loyalty were the same thing." "And do you think she's gone forever?" "No," I whispered. "Just wiser? A little more careful with who she lets stand close." Claire smiled. "That's not loss, Jules. That's growth." I started journaling, not about them, but about me. What I liked. What I wanted. The sound of rain on the porch. The smell of new books. The way silence no longer scared me. Some nights, after putting Maya to bed, I'd sit on the porch with a glass of wine and write until my fingers cramped. I wrote about small victories, fixing the leaky sink, driving past their old cafe without flinching, laughing again. And sometimes I wrote about forgiveness. Not the kind that excused them, the kind that unshackled me. Because forgiveness isn't saying, "It's okay." It's saying, "I won't let it poison me anymore." Daniel tried to make amends. He sent letters, long, remorseful ones, filled with the kind of insight only guilt can carve. He wanted friendship, understanding, maybe redemption. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Out of peace. He was Maya's father, and that was the only role I would ever let him hold again. Boundaries became my form of healing. As for Lena, she stayed gone. Every now and then, I'd hear about her through mutual acquaintances. A new job, a move to another state, a man she was helping through a difficult time. History, it seemed, had a way of repeating itself when lessons were ignored. But I didn't wish her harm anymore. Just distance. Because some people heal best when they're finally out of your orbit. A year after it all happened, I took Maya on a trip to the coast. We stood barefoot on the sand, the tide cold around our ankles. She chased the waves, giggling, hair wild in the wind. And I thought, this is what survival looks like. Not a grand declaration. Just a mother and her daughter standing at the edge of something vast, breathing again. Maya turned to me then, eyes bright. "Mommy, look." A seashell. She ran to place it in my hand, a small, chipped thing, pink at the center. "It's broken," I said gently. "But it's still pretty," she replied. I smiled, my throat tight. "Yeah, sweetheart, it is." And I realized that was me. Cracked, yes, but still capable of catching light. Back home, I started something new, a small workshop for women. It began as a support circle, then grew into classes. Journaling, boundaries, self-worth. We called it the Still House. Every Thursday, women came with stories of their own, betrayal, loss, loneliness, rediscovery. We sat in a circle with tea and candles, and we told the truth. And in each of their faces, I saw reflections of who I had been and who I was still becoming. One night after a session, as I was locking up, a woman approached me. She hesitated, then said, "Your story. It made me leave someone who kept breaking me." I smiled softly. "That's the point, isn't it? To save each other, a little at a time." She nodded, eyes glistening. And as I watched her walk away, I felt something settle inside me, not closure exactly, but purpose. Pain had turned into something useful. That, I realized, was the real ending. The healing doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes I still dream about her. Sometimes I still wake up with that ache, The old reflex to call my sister and tell her something funny, something small. And then I remember. She's not the person I used to know. Maybe she never was. And yet, there's a softness that remains. Not for her choices, but for the girl we once were. Two sisters building castles in the dirt, not knowing how easily they'd wash away. Because that's the cruelest part of betrayal. It doesn't just take what you love. It takes who you thought you were when you loved them. But if you're lucky, it also gives you a chance to become someone stronger. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and Maya's breathing fills the hallway, I still hear her voice. Not the sharp, manipulative tone she used at the end, but the soft, laughing one from years ago, when we used to share a bed on stormy nights. She'd tell me she'd always protect me, that sisters were forever, and for the longest time, I believed her. Now, I think forever just means until we break each other in ways we can't undo. I've stopped asking why she did it. The answers don't matter anymore. Was it envy? Loneliness? The need to feel wanted? Maybe all of them. Maybe none. Because betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from people who know exactly where to press their hands when they want to make you bleed without leaving a mark. But there's a strange kind of freedom in surviving something like that. You stop fearing the worst, because the worst has already happened. And you're still here. You learn how to live inside your own quiet again. How to pour coffee for one. How to smile at your reflection without searching for approval. How to let peace feel louder than pain. Sometimes women at the still house ask me how I forgave her. I tell them the truth. I didn't, not really. Not in the way that makes it neat or noble. I forgave enough to stop carrying her in every silence. Enough to stop dreaming in her voice. Enough to let my daughter grow up without bitterness in the air she breathes. But I don't think forgiveness always has to mean reunion. Sometimes it's just the decision to stop reopening a wound that will never look the same, no matter how cleanly it heals. There's one memory I hold onto, though, not because it hurts, but because it reminds me how far I've come. It's the night before my wedding. Lena was helping me button the back of my dress. Her hands were shaking, and I thought it was emotion. Now I know it was something else. The quiet awareness that she couldn't let me have something she didn't believe she deserved herself. When I think of that moment now, I don't feel anger. I just feel understanding, a sad kind of knowing. She wanted to protect me, but protection, in her world, meant control. She took everything I loved because she didn't know how to love without taking. And I survived because I finally learned how to give without losing myself. So, if you've been where I've been, if someone you trusted hollowed you out in the name of love, I want you to remember this. You are not what they took. You are what's left. And what's left is enough to start over. Now, some nights, I sit on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and watch the world go dark. The crickets sing, the air smells like rain, and for a moment, I almost feel like that little girl again, the one who still believed her sister's promises. But this time, I don't need her to keep me safe. I've learned how to keep myself. And sometimes, when I tell my story at the still house, women lean in close, eyes wet, hearts open, and they ask me softly, "Do you think you could ever forgive her, truly?" And every time, I smile a little and say the only honest thing I can. I already have. I just haven't told her. Then I look out at their faces, the ones carrying stories of their own, and I ask them what I'll ask you now, sister. Would you have forgiven her? If this story touched something in you, if you've ever survived a love that broke you, you belong here among women who know. Welcome to the Sisterhood.